what we have here is I've got a grid that's been created using fault sticks and a 3D seismic surface. Now, what I'm going to demonstrate is I'm going to show how we can use a tool in Petrosys called the Spatial Editor to edit components of this grid and essentially try and tidy up areas where the modelled grid version is not as accurate as we want it to be. So the Spatial Editor, you can access this in a number of ways. You can go up to the Edit menu and select Spatial Editor, but the way I quite often like to access it is just by selecting the layer that I want to edit and then select Edit. Now this will open up a couple of new panels. So we've got this panel here, which is all of our data editing controls. It also gives us access to a number of advanced operations, which are currently unselected. And we also have this panel over here. So this panel will be populated if we have GIS data such as polygons and polylines within our spatial editor. So I'll show you that in action just by adding in one of our original layers. So if I go to Open, and I'll just go to Shapefile, and I'll navigate to this layer here, select Open. And what it's done with this data open, it's essentially a regional file showing license block boundaries. With this data selected, you can essentially see all the attributes relating to the polygon selected. Now, with the spatial editor, we can edit the grid in two different ways. By default, the grid nodes editing option is selected. And what that means is you can use these icons down here to directly manipulate the nodes within the grid. So for example, here, if I select this option here, I can choose a number of different modes. So for example, with the set value mode on, and I'll just put in an arbitrary value, you have what we call the edit circle here. And you can change the size of this by holding down Shift and using your middle mouse button, or by using this scroll bar here. If I just move that, you can see that it's directly changed the Z values of those nodes, and then the contours are automatically regenerated. You can also do clear values from your grid, so this will remove any values, and you can carry out operations such as reinterpolating areas where you may have missing values around your grid. So this is quite useful when you're creating a very rough grid from a raster image where you might want to remove artifacts at a later occasion. In this instance, it's probably not the most useful workflow because we're gridding from seismic data. I'll focus on the contour editing node. So I just changed the edit mode to contours. I'll just click no to that. And what that does is it will add in an additional layer into the spatial editor which essentially allows us to edit the components that make up a grid. And I'm going to focus on the edited contours and the edited faults. If I zoom in down here, we've got an area down here where I'm going to want to actually extend this fault and join it up to this fault here. Judging from the contours, it looks like we may have had some missing fault sticks from our original data set, which means that the gridding has terminated the fault in a location where it may not have ended in reality. So how do I do this? What I'm going to start off with is I select this fault in question, and then I'll use the rubber icon here to interactively erase part of my fault. And I'll just click. So I've essentially removed that section. And then I'm going to change and go into the edit shape mode, which is the pencil icon here. I'll zoom in a bit further, and I'll make sure that the snapping is selected as shape, and I'll also make sure that, first of all, I'll make sure that this fault is selected, click on the pencil icon, and then if I select the fault, it will now allow me to extend this fault here. So I'm just left clicking, and if I want to undo any of the options, I just right click. So I'm just going to start digitizing down and have this fault terminating here, and I'll follow the contours and then double click to end digitization. Then the next thing I just want to do is I just want to smooth that fault out a little bit. So I'm going to use the smooth icon here, and I will select this. And then you can see that that's smoothed that out. Oh, I did that a wee bit too much. So there we go. And then the final thing I just want to do is delete these underlying contours now. So I can just select them and delete these ones here. I can also, if I just group select several of these, I'll use the rubber icon to remove that there, and remove that there. And then the last thing I want to do is just snap these contours so that they terminate at the edge of the fault. And I use this icon here called Snap Lines to Faults. And that's them snapped. Okay, I've edited the contours and I've edited the fault. The next thing that I want to do is actually regrid this part of my structural grid so that the 3D element of this accurately reflects the fault and contour data. The way in which you can do this, you can either go and select the gridding option up here and select regrid changed areas, or you can use this icon, shortcut icon down here, which allows me to perform a localized regridding. So if I click on that, what it's done is it creates a buffer zone. At the minute, the buffer zone is set to 300 meters within the areas that have been edited. So you can increase and decrease this. And what that means is any area out with that zone is not going to be regridded. It's only going to affect this portion here. So I'm happy with a buffer zone of 300, and I'll click OK. Then the next thing I need to do is I just need to save that. So when an asterisk appears next to my layer, I'm just going to click Save As, which is this icon up here. I click that, and I'll select my output directory, and I'll just select an existing layer, which is this one here. Click OK. That's fine. Click OK. So now I'll close down the spatial editor and we'll have a look to see how that's been displayed within the mapping window. There we go. So you can see that it's populated this area with a extended fault, and we now have a discrete hanging wall and footwall block. And if I display this data within the 3D viewer, you can see how that has changed. So this is my original grid, and this is the area that I've edited. So if I turn on the edited grid, and you can see how that's now been updated.